David was fired from his job, and only then did he suddenly realize that the entire industry he worked in had been replaced by artificial intelligence. If he wanted to find a new job, he was afraid that he would have to learn a new specialty from scratch, learning artificial intelligence. In his 40s, he felt exhausted. Not only does he not have the time cost of learning again, but he also seems to have lost the ability to reconstruct his expertise. Reaching middle age is like traveling to the middle of the road and their car breaks down. With retirement still far ahead and no way back to the starting point in the rear, starting over again is nothing more than an empty phrase. Any labor that can be programmed will be replaced by a programmable automated system. Any labor that can be skilled through learning can be replaced by artificial intelligence. Capitalist-led industrialization has deprived workers of the means of production. Capitalist-led artificial intellectualization will perhaps deprive workers of their right to work. Starting in 2025, AI will not only replace countless Davids, but also eliminate many professions. When most people's jobs are replaced, then the laborers who lose their jobs will become the specter that the world no longer needs, or perhaps the specter of communism that will come again.
A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this specter. Pope and Tsar, Metternich and Guizot, French radicals and German police spies. Where is the party in opposition that has not been decried as communistic by its opponents in power? Where is the opposition that has not hurled back the branding reproach of communism against the more advanced opposition parties, as well as against its reactionary adversaries?
Please follow me and subscribe to my channel. We discuss today the impending catastrophe that is already close at hand, Romer's crisis point, the apocalyptic tempest that could bring humanity to its doom. When we stop thinking about social justice, the revolutionary storms of socialism are gathering in the sky. As an individual, there are two costs. Labor survival costs, which includes the sum of the individual's expenditures to maintain minimum consumption, such as food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. The other is labor sustainability cost, which includes the sum of the cost of survival and the minimum expenses of maintaining a family, including raising children. Survival costs guarantee that you are alive, and sustainability costs ensure that you can have offspring who can continue to provide labor for productive activities. We also know that labor can be replaced by capital in human production activities, which is defined as capital labor substitution, also known as labor saving or capital-intensive technology. For example, the application of machines, automation, and even improving knowledge and skills can replace some or all workers' labor. In the free choice of the business owner, when the capital labor substitution is lower than the market wage, the business owner will choose to substitute capital for labor. There is an equilibrium point, which I define as Romer's crisis point, when the cost of capital substitution is lower than the labor sustainability cost, which would make it possible to propose a theory of exploitation and class for socialism, which can provide a basis for a materialist political theory of socialism. The year 2025 will be the year of AI applications. The dramatic reduction in the cost of AI computational power has spurred innovation in a variety of applications. This innovation will make the age of AI, far beyond the age of digital automation, likely unprecedented, replacing multiple industries with full coverage without blind spots. The Romer's crisis point is just around the corner. It is an obvious truism that when workers' wages can no longer sustain the cost of reproducing labor, then the cost of survival of the workforce becomes the next game. The low fertility rates in developed countries may be a sign that individuals in the labor force no longer care about providing the next generation to be exploited by capitalism. When the cost of capital substitution is lower than the cost of survival of the labor force, The age of the robot may be upon us. So, is it true that the only way for human beings to have a viable future is to eliminate capital through revolution? The author of this theory is John E. Roemer, an American economist and political scientist. He published A General Theory of Exploitation and Class in 1982. In it, he constructed what Michael A. Lebowitz regarded as elegant models and techniques, the consideration of exploitation onto a new, promising terrain. When Karl Marx formulated his communist ideals, it coincided with a wave of industrialization that swept across Europe. Large numbers of craftsmen and peasants, as specific classes, were disappearing. The labor force, traditionally dependent on private ownership of the means of production, became the employed who had lost the means of production, the proletariat. Out of fear of losing the means of production, Marx developed his idea of communism, which sought to construct a new type of individual possession that would efficiently allocate the means of production.
The capitalist mode of appropriation, the result of the capitalist mode of production, produces capitalist private property. This is the first negation of individual private property, as founded on the labor of the proprietor. But capitalist production begets, with the inexorability of a law of nature, its own negation. It is the negation of negation. This does not re-establish private property for the producer, but gives him individual property based on the acquisition of the capitalist era, i.e., on cooperation and the possession in common of the land and of the means of production.
Marx expected to optimize efficiency through the appropriation of the means of production by the laborer. When discussing individual property rights, he used the ambiguous term Individualeigentum, a German phrase meaning to give the worker his personal property, or to re-establish the worker's personal ownership, which is fine to translate as to give the worker his personal ownership rights. While the translation as private property is not in line with the meaning of the word, but is not wrong in principle. But this reflects the uncertainty of Marx's own thinking. On the one hand, he still hoped to return to the age of agricultural society, where producers own the means of production. On the other hand, he looked forward to a new form of ownership by the workers in the face of capitalist efficiency brought about by industrialization. In his critique of Hegel's philosophy of law, Marx suggests that
the true basis of private property, possession, is a fact, an inexplicable fact, not a right.
Rights are determinate and inalienable. Marx expects that resources can be allocated to the laborers who use them most efficiently. This requires an efficient system of resource allocation, and Marx gives no path to its realization. The fundamental reason for this is that while Marx opposed capitalism, he also opposed the market economy that had existed in human society for tens of thousands of years. In order to pour out the dirty water, he poured out the baby bathing in the water basin as well. This opens a door for Lenin to engage in tampering or anti-Marxist activities under the banner of Marxism. Lenin advocated the nationalization of all land in Russia after the victory of the Soviet Revolution, and his political mentor Plekhanov believed that the land was the lifeblood of the Russian peasantry, that once it became owned by the state, the peasants would not take farming seriously. Russia's economy would collapse, and the population would be plunged into famine. Plekhanov pointed out that the peasants' idea of nationalization of land was reactionary in its roots. It was an attempt to revive in Russia the old system in which the land and the peasants were the property of the state. And this system is nothing but the Moscow version of the economic system on which all the Eastern autocratic powers are based. It follows that public ownership was advocated by Lenin as a synonym for state ownership. Marx was opposed to state ownership and utopia, and Marx was also opposed to the a priori ideal model of socialism, which is the theoretical basis of the planned economy. The planned economy assumes that human reason can calculate the optimal allocation of production, and this is precisely what Marx was also against. Marx was very clearly opposed to the idea of a specific picture of future society, which he saw as open-ended. A prematurely detailed depiction would limit future development and might even be coercive. All these ideas, which Marx opposed, were inherited by Lenin. Lenin constructed the Soviets to plan not only the economy, but also the life of each individual. Its source was nothing more than the serfdom that had existed in Russia, and Lenin sublimated it into state serfdom. Plekhanov was the first Russian Marxist and is known as the father of Russian Marxism. The fundamental reason why he and Lenin parted ways was Lenin's betrayal of Marxism. If Marx was on the left, Lenin was not only on the right, but on the extreme right. The concepts of left and right in politics derive from the French Revolution of 1789. In the National Assembly at that time, nobles and clergymen who supported the monarchy sat on the right. Some aristocrats and representatives of the third class who supported the liberals sat on the left. This historic seating arrangement led to the political right, representing the royalists who supported the established order. The left, on the other hand, represented the reformists who sought social change, liberty, and equal rights. As history develops, the concepts of left and right keep evolving, making it difficult to accurately understand their true meanings apart from the specific context of the discourse. The concept of relativity in thinking inevitably leads to a misalignment of rational thought. This is why I am particularly reluctant to use left and right for discussions. But one thing is clear. The right emphasizes the preservation of the established order, state power, and collectivism. The left, on the other hand, emphasizes individual freedom, equal rights, and individualism. Marxism, and European socialism in all its forms, is more concerned with individual well-being, individual liberty, and social justice. It is typically leftist. On the other hand, Leninism, with its emphasis on state order, the will of the leader, and unity of thought, is the right in the right. For an in-depth discussion of left and right, please refer to my other article, Liberty is Not Negative, Only Exist and None. The various socialist currents that were widespread in Europe and America, such as democratic socialism, social democracy, eco-socialism, and libertarian socialism, were all against Lenin's state authoritarian socialism and pursued the ideals of individual liberty and equality. All possessed good beginnings, trying to find a way to establish an ideal idyllic society under the brutal environment of capitalist free competition, while also maintaining the high efficiency of capitalism. They have good idealistic beginnings and have even identified some of the problems that exist, but have never found a realistic path to realization, and are not even willing to face up to the free market, which has existed in mankind for a long time. John Roemer's model is perfect, but he misdirects the results once again to exploitation. Actually, when the capital-labor substitution below the cost of hiring labor becomes a reality, it essentially excludes part of the labor force from the labor market. In the age of industrialization, cottage craftsmen became the new employed with little to no transfer costs. Even in the age of automation, the skills required to migrate between industries can be accomplished through short-term training. Thus, migration between occupations was not costly. But moving into the internet age, the cost of transferring industrial workers to programming engineers is no longer a task that most people can accomplish. Now, artificial intelligence has made the cost of industrial migration of labor so high that relying on individual input has become an almost impossible mission. Economics is an ex post facto science. It is more about explaining what has happened than creating solutions to problems. In fact, all sciences, except for mathematics, which is an invention, are mostly discoveries. It is the discovery of the causes or laws behind phenomena. Science, therefore, is usually not about solving problems, but about explaining them. The entrepreneur who dares to innovate is the true inventor. The essence of all technology is invention. It is the invention of tools to solve problems. The essence of all innovation is invention, the invention of new modes of productivity. The market provides a variety of products for consumers to choose from. Consumer is God is not a slogan, because the entrepreneurial competition is determined by the consumer who can survival of the fittest. European and American countries have never defined their national economic systems in their constitutions. At the same time, federalized countries, such as the United States, give localities enough autonomy to self-adjust their economic systems to fit their productivity. Both the primitive capitalism of the United States and the high welfare societies of Northern Europe provide a market of institutions for human beings, giving citizens a choice with their ballots or with their feet. China's reform and opening up deregulated private life, a planned economy and a free market economy, two systems coexisting, is also an institutional choice provided by society. Under the institutional market, both competition and cooperation provide consumers with the possibility of choice. Ronald Coase went from studying the market of products to the market of ideas, and finally, after studying China, proposed the market of institutions.
China's embrace of both its history and globalization leads us to believe that Chinese capitalism, which just started its long journey, will be different. This is desirable not just for China, but for the West and everyone else as well. It is also desirable for the global market economy. Today, biodiversity is recognized as vital for sustaining our natural environment. Institutional diversity plays a similar role in keeping human society resilient. Capitalism will be much more robust if it's not a monopoly of the West, but flourishes in societies with different cultures, religions, histories, and political systems. While trade in the global market for goods makes war too expensive to fight, a global market for ideas can accommodate and thrive on the clash of ideas, but steers us away from the clash of civilizations.
As the Austrian school economists were concerned, our emphasis on markets is not a preference for markets, but a preference for free choice. When markets do not exist, people lose their liberty of choice and, inevitably, their ability to evolve. If there is only one system in the world, even if it is democratic, then human beings will be slaves to democracy. In this respect, I am not against socialism that engages in competition. I am only against socialism that has no choice. So I don't object to someone willing to choose democratic socialism, but I am firmly against National Socialism. When Roemer's crisis point arrives, politicians and academics with an Austrian school entrepreneurial spirit will inevitably think about and invent different institutional improvements so that labor can always survive in the labor market, rather than being excluded. When capital can replace labor, I believe that entrepreneurs in the market can create new labor. Marx believed that the society of the future would be realized through the impetus of actual social forces, not through the rational design of an elite few. This is just like the theoretical proof of Austrian school economics, which not only recognizes the goal of social development, but also discovers the path of development, and even more so, the source of the power of social development. As Hayek argued for spontaneous order, evolution necessarily opens up infinite possibilities for mankind as long as free choice exists.